Hello, my name is Ben Friedman here from Ben and Brand See a Movie presents The Wild Wild West, where we talk all things Wes Anderson and the films he makes, and we are on our final film for this series, his most recent film, The French Dispatch. And with me, as always, has been my co-host for this entire segment, Jalal Ahmad.
Happy to be here once again, and for the almost final time, Ben.
I know, Jalal, I'm really excited to have you on for a movie that I've actually been excited to talk about because I've had a lot of thoughts on it, and I did not do an in-depth review on this film when it came out last year. So I am really excited to talk The French Dispatch with you. And this is kind of like the end of it because this is the last Wes Anderson film.
Yeah, his 2021 film. He hasn't made anything this year, so
yeah, and he does not have anything coming out this year as well. His next film will star Tom Hanks, though, so that is one to look forward to. But I think also the thing that I'm really excited about is we have the winner of the Wes Anderson bracket determined, and I mean that in the sense that we have who won it has been determined.
The character is what you're clarifying, not the person from Reddit, right?
Yes, we have the person who won it, the character. We also have the person who won the tournament and is getting the prize.
Got all the winners today.
We have all the winners determined today.
Wow.
And you know what? We'll tease that for the end. We'll tease that. That way the winner will be sure to stay tuned through the whole episode.
Or fast forward 45 minutes, either way.
They could do that too. But with that all said, Jalal, are you ready to just jump into it?
Let's get it.
Let's do it. And let's talk about The French Dispatch, or as it's more commonly known, The French Dispatch of the Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun, which I'm sure that's how we all refer to it.
Right off the tongue.
Yep. I know when I'm talking to all my friends, I always say, no, it's not The French Dispatch. It's The French Dispatch of the Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun.
Have some respect,
get
sir.
It right, you son of a...
Nutcracker.
Yeah. This film is an anthology comedy drama, and it's really key to understand. This is an anthology. This is kind of
an
anthology stories put in together that have this overarching story that they're all a part of this journalism team run by Ralph. I want to say his name is Ralph St. Clair, who is played by Jesus, no, that's his character from the Royal Tenenbaums. This character, played by Bill Murray, is Arthur Howitzer Jr., the editor of The French Dispatcher, based on Harold Ross, the co-founder of The New Yorker. This is supposed to be clearly a New Yorker reference of a newspaper. There are four overarching kind of newspaper, like journalist teams going on and telling their each own individual story. The first one is a singular one called The Cycling Reporter with Owen Wilson. The second one is called The Concrete Masterpiece, which is about an imprisoned artist played by, and the cast for this one is Benicio del Toro, Tony Revolori, Adrian Brody, Tilda Swinton, Leah Seidex, Bob Balaban, Henry Winkler, who was a great addition, and Lois Smith. Then we have the Revisions to a Manifesto, which is a college student who leads a revolution. This one includes the cast of Timothee Chalamet.
Chalamet?
Yep. Frances McDormand and Christopher Waltz. The next one is called The Private Dining Room of the Police Commissioner. This one features newcomer to Wes Anderson, who will also be appearing in his next film, Jeffrey Wright. We also have Liev Schreiber, Stephen Park, Willem Dafoe, Edward Norton, and Saoirse Ronan. And then finally, we kind of wrap this all up with the obituary, which features Bill Murray as Arthur Howitzer Jr., Elizabeth Moss, Jason Schwartzman, and Wally Waldrowski. Oh, and Angelica Houston, I should mention. But so this is that's the cast, and that's the easiest way to break down the cast. Again, this is a film about journalism, and it's basically the individual stories that make up a magazine and their stories going on throughout. This film is directed, of course, by Wes Anderson. Comes out last year to strong reviews. I know there were definitely some more mixed reviews than, of course, some other Wes Anderson films. It ends up getting about a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's praised by some, disliked by others. The New Yorker, I should mention this, they gave it the acclaim of the best film of the year. I wonder why the New Yorker of all magazines, where it's based on, gave it that high. But it also got some praise from others. IndieWire called it their sixth favorite film of the year. Vogue mentioned it. It was a film that certain people loved, and it was seen as a love letter to journalism. This is a film that had a budget of $25 million and grossed $47 million. Hard to exactly tell what those numbers mean because we are now in a post-COVID world. So box office kind of doesn't reflect anything at this point because it comes out in October 2021, which if you remember, Delta was kind of raging at that time.
Good old Delta. I mean, this is where the reign of HBO Max takes over.
Yeah, so there's just those issues. It premieres at Cannes, comes out in October 2022. October 2022, 2021. And it, like I said, it just has all of that going against it. So I don't know what to make of the box office. I still don't know what to make of the box office. And it, one last thing to note that I think is really important. It receives the return of Alexandra Desplat doing the soundtrack, who has previously now worked with Wes Anderson on multiple of his past few films, including Isles of Dogs and the Grand Budapest Hotel. So it's basically the all-star cast of Wes Anderson coming to play for this movie that is an anthology comedy drama. And one last thing to note that I think is very important to note, and it's kind of an awkward one, and I don't really want to get in depth on it because it, the news just kind of broke a week ago, and we're still kind of determining what it is, and there hasn't been an official statement. But with the fact that he's one of the stars of this film and he's been such a frequent collaborator of Wes Anderson, Bill Murray did get was involved in a film that got their production halted due to inappropriate behavior. We don't know what that means yet. There hasn't been a lot of reporting on it. Based on the comments that have come out and the leaks, it seems that it could have been misconduct on set. This was on Aziz Ansari's new film that he was directing, so they're dealing with all of that. So stories like this are going to be fluid, and possibly by the time you hear this episode, we're going to get another update on it. It just felt weird not addressing that off the top when we're talking about Bill Murray, who, again, is the central point of this episode. So do realize when we are talking about Bill Murray, we are talking about it in a context of I've heard the allegations or I've heard the issues on set, and now it's what's going to happen and what are the ramifications going to be, if any. And yeah, so just wanted to put that precursor out because I didn't want to ignore it. But yeah, so moving on. Let's talk about The French Dispatch. Shall we, Joel?
We shall.
What was your hill to die on this film?
Ben, I remember us talking about this previously on your other episodes, and I remember you really, really not liking this movie, if I may spoil that for your audience.
Yes.
That hopefully has been paying attention this whole time. I honestly thought it was a perfectly serviceable movie. I thought it was fun enough. And I personally enjoy anthologies, but you do lose something throughout when there's not one big narrative strand that's being followed throughout. So you do lose a lot of investment in character. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
That is totally fair, and I will go into my hill to die on because I agree with parts of what you said. I will agree there are chunks of this film I really enjoy. It's the issue that the chunks don't make a whole, and I just couldn't get enough from this film to call it great. So yes, while there's parts of it that I really appreciated, overall, I had a more negative review of it. And I think it's just based on, and not an ambition from him. I understood what he was trying to do, but it felt like, how do I say this? When I was watching this film, my biggest criticism was, I don't understand what point you're trying to say. And I feel like you have a bunch of mini ideas that each on their own could have been actually a pretty interesting movie, but they're too just brief throughout that I never got satisfied with really any. That was my issue with the film.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue that just stems from it being an anthology. I do think that if you took any of those shorts and tried to flesh them out into their own movie, it wouldn't have worked. The stories themselves worked, in my opinion, a lot better as short stories.
Maybe the reason I say that is because I thought there were 2 stories in particular. So there's 4 anthologies really in this film. It's the
I barely even counted Owen Wilson's one, to be honest. It didn't even register in my head that I thought that was still introductory material.
I counted, but so there's that one. There's of course the Painter one. Then there's the Revolution one. Then there's the Police. Technically, you could count the Obituary. I'm not really, but for me, there's 2 that I enjoy and 2 that I found that fell pretty flat for me. And I think the biggest issue is they kind of went on level of enjoyment from beginning to end was how it was for me. The one I enjoyed the most was the one called The Concrete Masterpiece, which is the one about the imprisoned painter.
Yeah.
And then I enjoyed The Cycling Reporter. And then I had moments where I enjoyed the revisions to a manifesto. And then The Private Dining Room of the Police Commissioner, I just kind of didn't care about. So that was the issue where it was it started higher for me. And then each one got progressively worse and more boring.
I would agree with that. I thought if we are counting The Cycling Reporter as one of the stories in the anthology, I think that is the one that very much did not overstay its welcome. I think because it was so short, it was pretty effective.
Yeah, and I thought it was a funny one. I thought it was just a short, simple, funny one that kind of got the point across of the movie and gave you the style. Mm-hmm. And I was just fun to see Owen Wilson. So that was the one where I'm watching it. I'm like, okay, I like that. It's based on, an actual guy who would do that, where he would cycle around Europe and write about his adventures. I thought that had enough going on with it that I really enjoyed that one. And then, like I said, my favorite of the 4 is The Concrete Masterpiece. Mm-hmm. That's the one where I actually thought there was an interesting film to be told in there, and I actually would have liked to see those characters explored. So let's just kind of go from top to bottom with it. And I think we should just start with the fact of, let's just start where it all begins, with the fact that this film follows the death of Arthur Howitzer Jr., who is the editor for the French Dispatch. And he then decides to, but he dies, and it is the final edition of the French Dispatch. So they're all trying to assemble what will be the final magazine of the French Dispatch. This all takes place in a fictional French town of Ennui-sur-Blassat.
Ennui, just call it Ennui.
Yeah, which literally means boredom, which is kind of a funny play on word. And like I said, so that's where we all start. We see Wes Anderson's love of France. He's a resident of France. And from my understanding, if you are in one of the cities, it might be Paris, I believe is where he lives, you will just randomly see Wes Anderson walking around, grabbing a croissant. Basically, he's around. If you go to Paris and you know the neighborhood.
Yes, Wes Anderson, one of the most identifiable faces in the world.
Yes. In fairness, if you know what Wes Anderson looks like, you'll never forget what he looks like.
To be fair, I know what he looks like, and I forgot what he looks
like. Really? I feel like the hair itself is enough where I'd be like, that's Wes. And I think the style, I'm like, whoa, what's Fantastic Mr. Fox, but 6 feet and 45-year-old doing in France? Because, he does have that same style. So I feel like I'd recognize him. But
Let's bring you to France. Let's put this up to the test.
Yeah,
Let's see if your audience will agree with you.
So I'm going to France. That's a pretty sweet deal for this.
Yeah, if you want to fund our trip to France, please email us at intothebeniverse@gmail.com.
That's not my email, but I appreciate it.
I tried. I forgot for a sec.
It's Beniverse Media.
Beniverse
Media. Beniverse Media. Beniverse Media.
Even you don't know your own email.
I don't know it. I'll be honest. But with that all said, one, I'm going to learn my email this weekend.
Man, I hope so.
But I think the idea of this film is where the film loses me, to be honest, because I'm just like, I get what you're doing, but like, I don't know. That was my thing where I just instantly, right from the beginning, I'm just like, oh, he's making a journalism movie, but he's not going to make it like the other ones. Like, he's not going to like do all these things. They're each going to be singular stories. All basically, he's making a magazine come to life where you can be reading something one page and then the next page not be reading something completely different.
Yeah.
And I will just full on state my bias. I'm not a big anthology guy. Like, straight up, like, I don't tend to enjoy when movies do an anthology style. In TV shows, I can, but I don't like it when it's episode to episode. It has to be kind of a season thing for me.
See, I enjoy self-contained stories, especially in TV shows. Movies, I'd say less so, but I still do. Other anthology movies are not really coming to mind at the moment, though. But something like, I don't know, Black Mirror, Love, Death, and Robots. I enjoy just picking the ones that I would enjoy rather than having to slog through. Because any TV show, except for a select few, I'd say has some bad episodes that you don't really want to watch.
Of course.
But with an anthology, what the beauty of it is you don't have to watch the bad ones.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I think that's
movie, it's less so though, because you still have to sit through the whole thing.
I think that's the thing that's where this movie's going to end up being for me. It's going to be a movie I watch segments of this movie. I'm not going to watch the whole movie. It's just not one that is going to ever be on repeat for me. And let's just jump into the one that I think works the best, which is the concrete masterpiece.
I would absolutely agree on that.
And this is a really interesting one because it has the material that you think could go really wrong for Wes Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
And I did read some pieces about it because, and let me briefly describe what this one is about. This is Benicio del Toro plays a prisoner who starts taking art classes, or he is an artist. He's in prison for, is it murder?
Yeah, man. It's violent murder, I'm pretty sure.
He's in there for murder, and essentially he's allowed to continue, because he's an artist, he's allowed to continue taking art classes in there. And he gets one of the prison guards, played by Leah Sawdux, who I believe is how you pronounce her name. And she basically poses for him as she's his muse, essentially. And she does full nude display. Basically.
Yeah, she's a nude model, and then
who's also his prison keeper.
Yeah, and Del Toro would basically, like, he fell in love with her, and then uses her essence and image to paint abstract art.
Yeah, and like I said, instantly off the bat, if you've been following the Wes Anderson series we've done here, that premise already just sounds
a little bit of a red flag.
Like, and I read a few pieces on it, whereas people were accusing this film of the female gaze, which is essentially what Leia's character Simone is put in this.
Give me the male gaze.
Sorry, the male gaze. You're right. Sorry, the male gaze, which is what Simone, which is the character played by Leah's character, is basically in this film. And I can't disagree necessarily with the criticism. I did just find this, though, the most charming, and I thought their relationship was the most fleshed out, and I thought there was a sweetness to it, and I think it's largely based on the performance of Leah, who is able to give this soft yet vulnerable yet hardened performance as this prison guard, and it makes this relationship a really unique one, and there's literally a vulnerability associated with the character, of course, when she strips down, but also just with that's also her kind of taking off the layers of like her guarding herself. And now she can kind of be, in essence, kind of intimate with this character that she otherwise doesn't really get to be intimate with and showcase to a larger part of the world. It's a kind of, like I said, it's a very stripped down, literally by
no pun intended.
Yeah. Idea of basically letting your guard down. And that's what it is.
Yeah. What I liked about that little story is that, they had an effect on each other. It wasn't a one-way thing, even though it was pretty clear that Del Toro was the one giving more in the quote-unquote relationship. By the end of it, when she returns to take care of her kid, it's because Del Toro opened her up and made her want to, like, you know, for lack of better terms, expose herself. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like I said, it's the most developed of the characters we get in this movie. I really like what Del Toro is doing as the character of Moses Rassenthaler in this, who is the artist. I really like he has this kind of hardness that's not necessarily seen in an Anderson film, where he almost has a crazed look to him, which is just like, he's so not put together, which almost goes opposite with everything we've kind of seen in Wes Anderson, not necessarily emotionally not put together. I just mean like his physical appearance. He is an unkempt man, and he just looks like that, which is interesting to see that dichotomy in a Wes Anderson film, because it's so striking visually based on everything else that we've seen in there. And when these two kind of get together, we see, I think, the softness of his character brought out, as well as her softness, and it makes for this vulnerability between the two that I think is loving and strong at its core. And that's what I really liked about this. And it also just has some really good comedy throughout. I think, again, another guy who just always should get credit for what he does is Tony Revolori as the younger Moses. He gets some really funny beats in this and establishes who this character is, so we know what he's going into with this relationship when he starts with Simone. So I think it's actually a pretty touching story overall.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely, again, as far as storytelling goes, I'd say it was the best of the bunch.
Yeah. There is one issue that I have with this story, and that's where I did just kind of take a second to defend the criticisms of the male gaze, which, again, not even necessarily defending it, just saying that it didn't necessarily bother me. Of course, I am male, so there does play into that. The one that I will admit, and it's always that point where we talked about, is this bad or is it not? I don't know, but it made me feel uncomfortable. Tilda Swinton's character in this segment is definitely played for laughs, and she's just the one who just... This is where I don't know why he does it, and I know we both had the same issue with Life Aquatic, where there's just a character just randomly nude for no reason, and hers is just like, she's supposed to be this like business person and this well-respected one, and in doing that scene, it kind of just
where she's just randomly naked for like 3 seconds.
3 seconds just on there, and all it does is
whoops, that's character. Me. You're like, why is that in there?
Yeah, because all I had with it was it took this character that was otherwise supposed to be a good business woman, and it was just like, oh, it's all based on her looks again and her like all that. It really just demeaned that character in a way that it just didn't need to be.
It's true. Demeaned. I think the attempt was to, well, for one thing, it was played for laughs.
It's played for laughs.
Better or worse, it's played for laughs. But I also think it was intended to make her seem, what was it? A little egotistical, like something, like a lot of, there is a, stereotype among journalists and reviewers that they're all incredibly into themselves.
Yeah.
And Ben, would you agree?
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm totally into myself.
So I think that was very much like, oh, you guys want to hear about that? Well, look at me type of thing, where she's trying to, like, remind you that because in the story, she's giving a lecture.
Yeah.
It was like a reminder to the audience that she was the center of attention, but it didn't quite land.
That's totally the issue with it, because I feel like sometimes I come off as a prude with like my ideas, where it's just like, oh yeah, well, this is like, it's just unnecessary nudity is my like kind of basically, if you were to sum up my critique on that, it's that. My issue isn't even that. It's just that like when it comes at the expense of a character's development, it feels weird. And this is
I'd say the thing is though, the storytellers, the journalists in this, they're not really supposed to have much development outside of, say, the food. I can't remember his name, but the food guy.
The food guy.
The last story.
Jeffrey Wright and all them, the police commissioner one.
Yeah. I think you didn't need to humanize the journalists.
I get it. The issue though is for this particular story, she's so the focal point, like she's the framing device for this story. So doing it just felt weird. It just felt, like I said, the word I thought was demeaning, where I'm just like, it's just a weird joke to do, just kind of naturally. I'm just like, and this is again where it's just like people are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, oh, he's just so like doesn't like nudity in film. That's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying to this though is I think there is a case where it comes at the expense, and I also just think it's needless. And to be honest, I found this bit a bit sexist, just straight up. Like,
to further your point, I'd say, there was purposeful nudity in the actual story that was being told. It was symbolic of them having to expose themselves to each other and
agreed, yes,
remove their barriers. With her, it really was just a joke.
It really is just a joke.
A joke that didn't really land. You want to know who the lecturer actually reminded me of?
Who?
Evelyn from 2.5 Men. Charlie and Alan's mom.
Oh, that's a good pull. Yeah, she does kind of have that like uppityness to her.
Yeah.
Here's I think where it hits for me, where I'm just like, that's the issue with the joke, is it's one-sided. Where there's other directors who do this, but they'll like, so for instance, Judd Apatow comedies, they'll have their sex and nudity on it for both sides, but that's the key. They always do it. Like if there's a nude scene in one, then you're also going to have Jason Segel's flaccid penis in Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Yeah, like, or that scene in The Proposal where Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock like run into each other.
Yeah, so that's like completely where it's just like, it's not the issue of it even being unnecessary. It's that it always seems to be played on one side. Yeah. One side always seems to get, this is the type of joke I'm going to give to your character. And it's like, gosh, maybe Snyder's right. Maybe I am just advocating for more penis in film. Because that was
the metaverse.
That's something we said on Moonrise Kingdom. I forgot what the point was being brought up. We were I remember we were talking about one of Bruce Willis's films, and that topic got up. So maybe that is my issue. Maybe for further equalization of the genders and sexes, I want more nudity in film on
all right, man, you and me, let's get up, take our pants off.
Right.
We're in our 20s. It's fine.
That's the summation, and I think it finally clicked where my issue is. It's that one group of people always gets that joke in Wes Anderson movies, and it's never really done the other way.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm just like, that's where I feel like I lose appreciation for that joke. Because if this was an isolated incident, where it's like, this is the only type of joke that's seen in a Wes Anderson film of this same punchline, it'd be fine. The thing is, it's in countless Wes Anderson films. I mean, of course, the most obvious one is Life Aquatic, where there's literally a character topless.
Yeah,
for no apparent reason.
I always thought the reason it was just to make fun of European people.
Yeah, and then there's one briefly in Royal Tenenbaums as well, where it's just like, that's the thing. I think it's also just like, it's not a clever punchline anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Where I'm just watching, I'm just like, that's the best punchline you could come up for this joke. And it's weird that a little scene like this, that it's literally a 2-second joke, and we spent a little bit of time focusing on it.
Arguably too much.
Very much arguably too much. The reason I focus on it is because here's the thing, at least when I watch movies, I do remember the little scenes that like I find distasteful or bad. Like that's like the stuff where I remember where I'm just like, where's my criticism of this movie? I can think of one particular scene, and I'm like, this is kind of the summation of issues I have with this. It's kind of similar, and I realized when describing this. Did you ever see Kingsman 2?
Yeah.
Do you remember okay. There's a scene.
I did. I thought the movie was pretty forgettable back then, and I still do today.
I do too. There's a scene in there where they go to like a festival, like a concert.
Oh, is this where he
fingers her and like puts the tracker in it? And I found that joke so distasteful in the movie. I thought it was just overly graphic.
It was. I don't know. It was crude, and also what made the joke worse, in my opinion, was the line, "Oh, finally, someone who knows what he's doing."
Yeah, like I said, it was like, all of
I was like,
that.
Kind of creepy at that point. Like,
that
why are spies saying things like that?
And when people ask me, like, why don't you like Kingsman 2? And I think of my criticisms of the film, which I have a multitude of, I can always kind of think back at that scene, and I'm like,
Kingsman 1 exists and is actually good.
Yeah, I'm like, this film is overly crude. Where the first film has that crudeness, this one kind of seems to make it the punching, like it makes it the punching bag throughout this film. And that's where my issue is, because so a little scene like this, what I'm saying, like, is I can remember it and be like, I have an issue with how this is portrayed. And again, I totally understand people are going to be like, it's a 3-second scene. It is no big deal.
We do not need to spend 15 minutes dissecting it.
Factually correct. It's just something that bothered me, and it's kind of just
where
like,
we're at, so deal with it.
Exactly. So that's my point on that scene. Besides that, I like this whole chunk of the film very much, and it's the part that I wish stayed a little longer, because this is where the film starts going downhill for me. And we're going into the next one, the revisions to a manifesto with Frances McDormand and Timothee Chalamet. This one's where it starts getting forgettable for me, where I'm just like, even thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I kind of remember what goes on. Like he's like leading this. Frances McDormand is here. She's Lucinda, a journalist profiling the student revolutionaries based on Mavis Gallant. This is where I really lose interest in the film, where I'm just like, okay, I get the point you're doing. I just don't find it interesting anymore. And yeah, I don't have much criticism of this. I think it's well acted. I think you're going to get characters like Tilda Swinton and Timothee Chalamet performing in this film. You're going to have interesting enough characters just based on it. But again, this is where I'm just like, you're losing the specialness of a West film for me, where I'm sitting there and I'm just like, these characters are kind of a nothing for me, and this whole story's kind of a nothing for me.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I thought the story was, again, perfectly serviceable.
Yeah.
As far as anthology films go, this was one of them. And
yeah, that's kind of the best way to describe it. I think the issue is, again, this is one where the premise is actually probably the most interesting of the three. If you were to tell me there's going to be 3 real anthology parts of this film, one's involving a police commissioner going to dinner, one of them's involving an artist falling in love with his prison guard, and the other one's about a student revolution and the journalist recording that basically student revolution going on. The student revolution one sounds like it should be the most interesting of the 3.
Yeah, I maybe you can just call me ignorant for this, but I wasn't sure if it was referencing an actual real life event or not.
I want to
really
say
tell.
it is. I want to say it's based. I want to say it's something related to Marxism, some of the Marxist movements.
It seemed like
Europe.
it. It seemed like, a college student revolution.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's just what it was. But I wasn't sure if it was actually based in some actual historical event or not. But honestly, it genuinely does not matter.
It really doesn't. And that was kind of just my issue with the film. And it was also, this one was the one where I also noticed it, because we do get a little bit more, I don't want to say action necessarily, but we do get a little bit more set pieces, I feel like, involved with this one. And my whole time watching it was, I'm like, this is pretty bland looking. Like, this looks like basically a bunch of other films I've seen before.
Yeah, honestly, I think again, Ben, we're agreeing on this one, and the reason I'm going to agree is because I don't remember what it looks like.
Yeah, that was my
There's
thing.
no shot really in particular, except for Timothee Chalamet getting out of the tub to go hand the manifesto to his teacher.
Yeah, I wonder why we remember that scene. Because it's Timothee
Yeah.
Chalamet.
Yeah, honestly, okay, if we can praise something in this story, it's definitely Timothee Chalamet's performance.
Yeah, Chalamet.
That guy's great. That guy was great as whatever his name is.
His name is Zephyrly.
Of course it is.
Zephyrly. Listen, it's hard not to make Timothee Chalamet good in a movie. It's really hard to do that. And, with that all said, like I said, I like sections of this scene. I think there's some interesting thing. I think there's a good dynamic between him and Frances McDormand.
Yeah, they were actually fun to watch. I mean, I obviously don't like the idea of them as a couple, but neither did Frances McDormand. So
again,
and neither did Timothee Chalamet. So.
Oh God, this is I'm not going to spend much time on this one. When I took a journalism class and we talked about journalism portrayal in it, it was journalism. It was a journalism and film class. So the whole point of it was we were watching journalists, how they're depicted in film. And the one thing that you always saw of female journalists is that they were romantically involved with the person they were reporting on. And again, it was kind of this cheap cliche because then it just creates this broader thing where people then value female journalists as like, that's how they do to get sources and stuff like that. And it really, again, bases it on their sex and all that. And so problematic in a lot of ways. It's another case of this one. I think I blocked out, honestly, that was a chunk of this story. I'm like, oh yeah, they are romantically involved, aren't they?
They were kind of romantically involved.
They're implied to have sex.
They hooked up. That's not just implied. That was straight up stated.
Yeah. So,
but when it came down to the question, the girl that Timothy in the end started dating, do you remember her name?
Juliet.
Okay, that's Juliet? A normal name. Wow.
I want to say that's it.
So all the Zephyrlys out there, I still love you. I'm just poking fun. But I mean, when it was straight up asked, like, are you guys dating? They both very much just said no.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I don't want to date her. And she was like, I definitely don't want to date a 20-year-old. So
yeah, like I said, that was just another thing where I'm just like, and there's another problematic issue of this film, which is just like, I think that's also another issue I have of this film. All of my criticisms that I feel like I've had towards Wes Anderson, this whole like 10 movies we've done, it all feels like they're present in this film. I think there's a lot of characters with basically none of them getting any real development. Apparently the fans agreed because no character from the French Dispatch made it to the second round, which is kind of telling. I think there's a world that just kind of doesn't fully feel played in, where it's just like, oh yeah, we're getting like Europe, but it's not shot in a particularly interesting way. It's just like, it feels really limited in contrast compared to Wes Anderson's previous work, where it just feels very closed in. It feels like there's undertones of comedy that I just don't feel like work. There's just too much going on, and it kind of just loses focus on itself. And the direction is so apparent by Wes Anderson, and it feels like it's so trying to be of his own style that it feels up his own ass. Essentially, so that's why.
I mean, again, this is the issue with it's just a issue present in anthologies. Development is a hard thing to do in 30 minutes. I mean, you can do it. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of short films and whatever that do manage to do it. Mm-hmm. This was not really one of them.
Yeah, and the problem was putting it in an anthology just elevated all of my issues that Wes Anderson has already. So that was the thing where I'm just like,
see those issues 3 times.
Yeah, so I'm just like, that really hurt me. So when we were talking the past few weeks and I poked shots at the French Dispatch, I think it's because every issue I would talk about, like, oh, I had this issue in Grand Budapest Hotel. Oh, guess what?
Life Aquatic in Moonrise Kingdom.
Same thing. Like, oh, I had an issue with this in Darjeeling. Guess what? It's in this film.
Guess what? It's in Rushmore too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like all these things that I had issues with for ever when I was talking about it, when we've been talking about these 10 films. They were all here, and now they're all in this film, and it kind of feels like this is an encompass of every issue I have.
I feel like you're gonna get some comment that's just gonna be like, "You don't understand Wes's style," then, and you're like, "Okay, maybe I don't." I still didn't like it.
Maybe there is straight up a case that I just don't like new Wes Anderson. There's straight up like there's filmmakers who you fall in love with and then fall out of love with, and vice versa. There's filmmakers who I was not a fan of, and then like second part of their career, like when they hit like a little bit older, a little bit more mature, starting to get to their 50s, you know, maybe they were now fathers or mothers, whatever it may be.
They've gone through more of life.
Yeah, exactly. And
look at us in our mid-20s just being like, oh, you know, we need people to experience more life when we haven't experienced anything.
I know, but it's the criticism. It's a straight up criticism of I'm looking at it and like, maybe it's the case. Maybe new Wes Anderson like is not going to be for me. It could totally be that case. I hope not, because I love a lot of his movies and some of them are my favorite of all time. But maybe it's just gonna be one of those things where I always kind of eagerly hope for a Wes Anderson film, and this is just the type of film that he's interested in telling. And power to him. He tells this film the way he wants to tell this film. And I really can't degrade him for that. Moving into the next segment of this film is the police commissioner one. This one has one singular thing that I am going to throw all the praise to, and that's Jeffrey Wright, of course, who just recently starred in, oh my gosh, he starred in The Batman. He plays Roebuck Wright, a food journalist based on James Baldwin. He's the best part of this anthology segment, largely because I like Jeffrey Wright, and I think he's a very charismatic lead, and I think he delivers the lines to the utmost of his abilities. And whenever you get Jeffrey Wright, you know you're going to get an actor who's willing to try 100%.
I would say the best part of this story very much was him narrating food.
Yes, agreed.
100%. That was the highlight. For better or worse, that was the highlight of that story.
Agreed. It was one of those things where I could have watched segments of it on YouTube forever.
Yeah, I'd say the story itself was lackluster. Honestly, as much as I love animation, the animated bits in this, I know that they were supposed to be referencing the actual like art from these books, which is cool, a cool idea, but it came so out of nowhere and went on for far too long.
It almost felt like another anthology within the anthology.
Yeah, like what came to mind was when I was watching Grand Budapest Hotel, and they had those little moments that are just diorama-y and little animated, and they were very charming. But these animated parts just seemed like they went on for way too long.
I agree. I 100% agree. I really don't have any thoughts of this last one. I found this one pretty meandering and dull throughout, and I think the only reason I had any form of investment was I liked Roebuck, played by Jeffrey Wright. Outside of that, I really don't even have thoughts on it. Here's how bad it is. I don't remember it. I don't remember this.
Yeah.
I remember character actors coming in. Like, I like Edward Norton a lot. Getting to have Edward Norton pop in for like a minute, totally good. I don't remember exactly the role he plays in this. I believe he's a kidnapper, right? Yeah. I think that's...
Honestly, I'm trying to picture it, and all I'm picturing is Edward Norton, Grand Budapest Hotel.
Is in this film, what is this overall segment of this film, part of the film again?
He's on a talk show, and then he's recounting...
kidnapping gone wrong, or kidnapping, I think. He's recounting
the fact that we're either terrible reviewers, or this really just wasn't memorable.
I think it's the latter.
Probably both.
Because I even though because I will admit, I did not rewatch this film. I've been way too busy this week to rewatch this film, so I rewatched chunks of it.
Yeah, we're recording this on Thursday. I think I watched this on like Friday or Saturday.
Yeah, so. It's been a little bit, but I remembered the first segment with Owen Wilson. I remembered the one with the
artist.
trainers. I
That was,
remember
again,
even
the
a
fact that
good
that was the most memorable one speaks volumes, especially when compared to the other ones, which, again, I'm not changing my stance on this. I think this movie was perfectly serviceable. Would I watch it again? Maybe. I definitely not in the near future, but I think I'm with Ben in this case, where I think I would rather rewatch segments of the movie than the movie in its
yeah.
entirety.
Yeah, because like I said, I didn't particularly care for the Timothee Chalamet storyline either, but I remembered a good chunk of that storyline. This third one, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I remember Jeffrey Wright, I remember the food reviews, I remember he's on the talk show, I remember there's something about a kidnapping.
I remember the moment where Bill Murray's character comes in and like saves him from jail and pays his bail. Beyond that, though, if you asked me to summarize this section, I would not be able to do it.
Yeah, and the film then kind of just ends with all these characters now coming together in color. And they're mourning the death of this guy that we're supposed to mourn, but we haven't.
But he was barely in the movie.
Time with him, like if you had to, and this was the weird thing making the bracket. I was trying to figure out who's the one that got the highest ranking for this, because it's like who's the most main character of this film. The argument I made, it was Arthur, played by Bill Murray in this film, because everything kind of revolves around the French Dispatch, which is his newspaper.
Yeah.
And it's all them coming together. But it's not really his film. I don't think Arthur's a memorable character at all.
It seemed more like these are three completely separate stories that Wes Anderson wanted to tell, and he had to have some through line between it.
Yeah,
he felt a lot less like a character and more like a plot device.
Which is weird when he calls this a love letter to journalism. Because I'm watching it and I'm just like,
why?
Yeah, I don't get why you're calling this a love letter to journalism, because we're supposed to get there and it's this final publication being released. And I think that's supposed to be where it's like kind of the gravitas of all these stories. And it's just like, there's supposed to be this weight of it where it's like, wow, we're losing this. Like we're losing a publication like this, which is supposed to then be reflective of what we're going through, where print media is dying. It's straight up every year it's getting massacred. It's getting smaller and smaller. We don't get to have these kind of journalists that are names anymore. You still get them with like the New York Times, I feel like is going to be an institution till we die. Same with probably the Washington Post. Even like, I mean, the Post is owned by Bezos. That's a pretty problematic thing. That's what this film's supposed to be the weight of. It's the fact that we've gone from what journalism is with all these stories to what it is now, dying, literally dead in front of us in Bill Murray's case.
Which I get. It's just more like,
I don't care in this film.
Yeah, if you were going to have, again, I think anthologies work best when all of the stories are very self-contained, because then you get to just kind of experience the stories as they come. But the necessity of, like, the point, making it a film necessitated some sort of, tying together some denouement of by the end, which again, in the moment, I think I kind of got swept up. Honestly, by the end, when they were all typing out his eulogy together, I think I felt something. I don't remember what I felt. It might have just been gas. But
yeah, I didn't feel anything.
looking back on it, it felt hollow.
It felt very hollow. I agree. I was just like I said, by the end, I'm like, I get this is supposed to be a reflection, and it's a very like pull back the curtains. Like journalism is dying, and this is an institution that we should protect. I'm a journalist. I fully agree with that statement, and yet I did not.
Please help Ben's livelihood.
Yeah, and yet I'm like, I don't really care. Like that's the message, because it felt so self-indulgent. You know what it felt like? And I'm going to get a little bit standing on a soapbox for a second. This felt like a bunch of people in Hollywood got the idea of like, we're going to save journalism, and we're going to make a film that's just so important and shows the importance of journalism. And it's going to remind audiences like why journalism is an important foundation, all of that. And then they make the film and it comes out, and I'm just like, I'm not particularly swayed. That's what it felt like. It felt really self-indulgent, where it's like, we're going to save it. Wes
Anderson film being self-indulgent?
Yeah, it really felt like that was the style.
Never would have thought.
Where it's like, I don't know, maybe instead of like telling a story of a character like James Baldwin, maybe you could have told James Baldwin's story, or maybe something like that. Like, maybe a film like Spotlight, which breaks down the Boston priest scandals. Like,
or maybe like, again, if you want us to celebrate this guy's life, you're right. Make him the focal point of the movie. Show him impacting all of these young journalists' lives. I think the whole idea that he was kind of like their parent, giving them their first like caring for them, trying to get them to become better writers and live as writers is honestly beautiful idea.
Really good idea.
In execution, it was not the best.
Yeah, because there were characters even that were like coming in, and I'm like, has this person like actually had a relationship with any, like, have we seen Arthur and this character interact? And I'm like, I'm racking my brain.
In pretty much every case except the last one, no.
So I'm like, why do I care that they're all coming together? I mean, I guess like there is a like specialness of like, oh, you gave me my first break. So it's like, I don't know, maybe you could.
But it was only the last one that he gave their first break.
Yeah, and that's maybe the idea of this, where it's just like what you were talking about right there, is maybe a way to have done that is with, you know, where the character comes in at the end of the third anthology with Jeffrey Wright, where he bails him out of jail. Maybe Arthur is a little bit more present in the film. If you're going to try to tie it all together in a really nice bow at the end, maybe make that character more presence in the overall to give it a little bit, maybe less of an anthology piece, but one that ties together while still being an anthology.
Yeah, if you want us to care, you got to make us care.
Yeah,
you can't just throw Bill Murray at us for the 10th time and be like,
yeah, because that's the thing. I didn't
here's
care.
The character you're supposed to get attached to. Like, okay, we got attached to him like 4 different times. Can you got to work.
Yeah, I didn't buy any of it. And that was my kind of just issue with it. Like, there's segments of this film I like. A lot of it's really forgettable. And I just don't think I think once you break down the actual message that it's trying to tell as a love letter to journalism, I'm like, I don't know if I buy it. I really don't know if I buy it. And I don't know if I like this depiction of journalism. And honestly, I think there was maybe a cooler way to do this film and a better way to do this film. And that's not me necessarily criticizing. He can do whatever style he wants. This is his film. This is how he wants to make it. I totally respect that. Doesn't mean I have to connect with it. And that's my biggest issue. I did not connect with The French Dispatch.
Yeah, and if any of you guys was listening out there,
words, and I think I missed the word. Did I miss a word? The French Dispatch, Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun.
At all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if any of you guys, you know, connected with the film or really liked some of the segments, I can see why. Like, it's still at the heart of it. It is still a Wes Anderson movie, and if you enjoy his style, you're still gonna find things to like in this movie. It's just that you can find those exact same things in better movies
in other films. He does. Yeah. Question for you. Best scene?
Probably not.
Best scene in the movie.
The only thing really coming to mind when you say that is Timothee Chalamet rushing out of the bathroom to hand the manifesto over.
Great scene. Great scene. Great scene. Mine's is probably where we're getting Moses' backstory with Tony Revolori. I thought the comedy worked pretty well in it, and I think it just introduced that character well for my favorite part of the film. And that's really all my thoughts on The French Dispatch. Joel, are you good? Any final thoughts?
I am solid.
Then with that said, let's get into, before we reveal the winners of everything, let's just get into our, ready? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Great Debate. My name is Ben Friedman. With me, as always, is Jalal. And what we have done is we have one singular question this time. We are both going to answer this broad question, and we're going to see who has the better answer. The question being, Joel, what genre of film do you want to see Wes Anderson tackle next?
All right. So what I was thinking actually is I would like a little return to form with Rushmore. And I want him to do, you mentioned Judd Apatow. I would like him to do a sort of, you know, teen comedy movie again. Because I honestly, looking back after watching all of these movies, back back when I first watched it, I don't think I enjoyed Rushmore. I liked it. I didn't love it, but
Yeah.
I have gone back. I haven't rewatched it, but I've thought about it more than I have
Yeah.
some of the other movies. And I think Wes Anderson could do well with like a more cynical type of teen movie, something like, less I'd say less American Pie, more Breakfast Clubby,
Yeah. That's not a bad pitch at all, and I like the idea because I agree. Rushmore has been one that's kind of stayed on my mind, largely due to the performances in that film.
Mhm.
The genre that I would like to see him really play in, I've always said it. I think there's a really good whodunit in him.
Ooh, you want a mystery?
I really
Murder
think
mystery.
there's a great whodunit where it's kind of a similar premise of Knives Out, but if we actually spent more time in the house, I feel like, not that we spend quite a lot of time in the Knives Out house, but more in the sense that it's just like there's all these little clues in the house, and it's really just clue. It's who did it, and going around and just trying to figure out. And with us uh, doing that, I think that's a really cool premise. I think that it allows a few things. He likes working with a large cast. That is the ultimate way to get a large cast, a whodunit, because you need to have like 10 people, four of them that you all kind of know just aren't important enough to be it. Then you get, so maybe those are some of the four that you get reoccurring, but they're not the huge stars. Then you get like the five who are actually big actors, and you're like, any of them could do it, but it's probably down to one of these three or four.
Mhm.
Then the great thing about it is you can get a detective who's the main singular focus of that. Of course, in Knives Out, that's being Daniel Craig, but whatever it may be. Then you, like I said, you get to do that, and that way you have the singular focus of a main character in it, because that's one of my things I feel like French Dispatch, and even to a little degree, Isles of Dogs kind of lacks, is a main protagonist that we are following and rooting for as he's kind of solving it. It gets the eccentricities, because I think a detective by nature in detective films gets to be a little bit eccentric because they're looking at all the details.
Yeah.
And that's been like kind of the motif of them. So I think you get that. I think you can get the large cast. I think you can get a great supporting cast around there. I think you can do a lot of the fun of one of my favorite reasons I love Royal Tenenbaums is because it exists within a home where it feels like that home and that place has just been built out, and it feels like it's been played in, and it feels like characters actually have lived there and get to interact with it, and it feels like home.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying about the big cast. I mean, Wes Anderson has done great jobs with big casts.
Yeah.
I wanted him to go strip it down a little bit with a smaller cast, because one thing I was thinking about Rushmore is that there are so many, because of these big casts, there's so many people that don't stand out whatsoever. In Rushmore, pretty much everyone is memorable.
I agree. I think the murder mystery allows for a cast that doesn't necessarily get to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I am comparing this a lot to Knives Out because I just recently rewatched Knives Out. I think the thing that works about that's a pretty big cast of characters. And the thing is, like, Jamie Lee Curtis's character is arguably more of the central focus than, let's say, Michael Shannon's character in the film. But the thing is, they get to interact so often in the film that it's all that's doing is helping benefit those two characters. So while Jamie Lee Curtis benefits from it, even if I don't get a ton of development from Michael Shannon's character, which in fairness, you get a pretty good chunk of development for him in that film, I think it's basically rising tide carries all ships, where if you get it in this, it makes sense for all these characters to be interacting. They all start accusing each other. It all just we start learning things about each character that could place them. Are they the murderer? Are they not? I think it allows for a larger cast to be developed in a meaningful way. Unlike other films where it's just like they're here for a cameo and that's it. I feel like in a murder mystery, it's like, okay, maybe they're not the focus point, but they're going to
do something to stand out. Yeah,
they're going to have one line that really benefits the whole overall story, and it makes the ensemble greater. So that's why I like the idea of a murder mystery. So that's my pitch.
All right, very cool.
And with that said, that is the great debate for this week. And it is time to announce the winners of the Wild Wild West. We had a great finale to it. Thank you, because if I'm correct, I believe the total number was over 2,500 votes were placed.
Whoa, wow.
2,500 votes were placed in the entire tournament from March to April. Week by week, we got there. We had a final four that consisted of Steve Zissou, Mr. Fox, Monsieur Gustave, and Max Fisher, leading to the championship round of Steve Zissou and Monsieur Gustave from the Life Aquatic and from the Grand Budapest Hotel. They fought it out for 2 days. A lot of votes were placed. I want to say about over 500 votes alone were placed in the championship round. And we have our winner. Everyone, this shouldn't be news if you've been following me, but in case you haven't, the best Wes Anderson character is,
according to Reddit.
Yes, according to everyone that voted.
Reddit and Instagram out there, everybody.
The best Wes Anderson character is Monsieur Gustave, played by Ralph Fiennes from the Grand Budapest Hotel. He won it with about, I want to say, about 60%.
Oh, he took it. He took it.
He won this definitively. I was pretty shocked. I thought that the Reddit in particular, which is a Reddit that very much favors Steve Zissou, I thought Steve was going to win this. He put up a valiant effort. Ultimately, Ralph Fiennes came out victorious in the Grand Budapest Hotel, which is we've already said, it's the most acclaimed Wes Anderson film that he's made. So it shouldn't actually be a shock that he did it. Wonderful character. So Mr. Gustave, congratulations to you. Good job. And with that said, we also have the winners for the Wild Wild West tournament. We had a ton of brackets submitted. It took me days to grade because, of course, when I did it when I sent it out to people via an Excel spreadsheet, it is not an easy thing to grade and print out correctly. So I had to spend some time organizing and getting it all ready. But let me get those sheets for you. So first, I should announce there are 2 winners. And one of them's a winner because of how bad they did. Coming in last place is a Mr. David Clark, who is somebody I actually quite know and have been friends with for quite a while. He scored a total of 590 points out of, I want to say it was about 1,900 points in his final four. He did correctly choose Steve Zissou and Max Fisher getting to the final four. From there, no one else was correct. He had in his final four Herman J. Bloom, Steve Zissou, Ash Fox, and Max Fisher, with his final round being Herman J. Bloom and Ash Fox, with his winner being Herman J. Bloom. That did not happen. He scored 590 points, and that was the least amount of everyone who submitted it. So for that, David, I already messaged you. You know what your prize you're getting. You're getting a Blu-ray of a Wes Anderson film along with a poster. So congratulations to you.
Congratulations, David.
Correct. Which, just by the way, if you didn't realize I was doing that, it's because I didn't want people intentionally tanking to win a prize. So I was just going to let that come out organically. But our winner, scoring 1,670 out of a total, I believe it was 1,900. We have a Mr. Owen Beitner, who scored, again, 1,670 points. And let's just say, I was pretty shocked that he got it, because in his first round, he definitely had some misses. He missed a few, and I know for a fact we had someone who got basically perfect in the first round. And here's the thing. You can go perfect in the first round. If you really don't have those final four pretty well, you're not going to win the tournament. And in this case, his final four consisted of Max Fisher, Monsieur Gustave, Steve Zissou, and Royal Tenenbaum, who he had beating out Mr. Fox. Of course, Mr. Fox did end up winning that part, so he did get that wrong. But he did then have Zissou moving on and Gustave moving on, with Gustave winning it all. So he got all of those points, accumulating in a total of 1,670 points for this tournament. He had a pretty impressive Then, Joel, I'm going to show it to you real quick. There's not a lot of misses he had.
No, not after the first round. Wow.
Outside the first round, the guy went pretty perfect, which was a pretty impressive thing. So to Mr. Owen, I have emailed you, and congratulations, sir, on being the winner of the Wild Wild West tournament. And with that all said, Jalal, I want to just ask you, who did you actually have making your finals?
Okay, so I had Mr. Fox.
Okay.
I had Max. I had Bloom, but was he on the same? Like this was my prediction. I don't remember what the actual bracket looked like.
Okay. Bloom was in one of them. I forgot which group he was in.
Doesn't matter. And I also had the Scoutmaster from
from Moonrise.
From Moonrise Kingdom. Yeah.
Who did you have in your championship round?
Oh God, I can't even remember. I think it was Scoutmaster and Max Fisher.
Okay.
Oh, no, Scoutmaster, Mr. Fox.
Okay. And who do you have winning it?
Mr. Fox.
Understood. So you really missed.
Yes, I did.
And for me, I will finally reveal it. I had Royal Tenenbaum making it to the finals versus Max Fisher, with Royal Tenenbaum winning it all. So that was my prediction. I believe I had Max Fisher going up against Monsieur Gustav, but I did have Max winning that round. So I was definitely off by a little bit. And then, of course, I just didn't get the final two right. With that all said, that is the Wild Wild West. Who is the best Wes Anderson character? It's Mr. Gustav. So
according to Reddit and Instagram.
Yeah. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to Owen and David for their prizes. Thank you all for playing around. Thank you all for voting, for continuing to support this channel. I got a ton of new followers and listeners based on all this. Thank you, Jalal, for jumping in very last second. I know Branson had to step out, and you jumped in literally about 3 days before the tournament officially started. So thank you for coming in.
Hey, this was so much fun to do, and I am always happy to jump on this podcast.
Yeah. And with that said, guys, that is Ben and Brand See a Movie brings you the Wild Wild West, where we explore all things Wes Anderson. It is over, and we are just back to Ben and Brand See a Movie.
It totally didn't start in February and almost end in May.
It started in March.
Okay.
It started the same day as March Madness. I am proud of that. It did go a little bit. It went 2 weeks longer than I was expecting it to, due to some stuff. But with that all said, thank you so much. Ben and Brand See a Movie will be back to you on Tuesday. Branson is not quite back just yet. We'll have more announcements on what's going on. But with me next week is a Mr. Christopher J. Harris, and we are talking the film Thunderstruck, starring Kevin Durant. Maybe it's in lieu of his recent first round flameout. It could be, but yeah. So we're going to be talking about a KD movie, and I hope his burner account does not go after me on Twitter. So thank you all for listening. My name is Ben Friedman. With me as always,
I'm Jalal.
And thank you all for playing around. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night.